Hello and a very warm welcome to yet another edition of World Panorama. Here we are getting you your weekly dose of major international news with a perspective. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get to detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. Debate continues over timing, reason for Israel's airstrike on Syria. Syria threatens retaliation. France declares Mali intervention a success but warns of dangerous new phase resisting guerrilla war. Egypt's port said simmering with anger. Protests against Morsi continue following deadly week of protests and attacks. And in sports, Tiger Woods wins 75th PGA Tour title, closes the gap on Rory McIlroy in world rankings. First up, time for the story in focus this week. Israel has finally done something the United States was afraid to do: get involved in Syria. An Israeli air attack staged in Syria this week may be a sign of things to come ahead. Israeli military officials appear to have concluded that the risks of attacking Syria are worth taking when compared to the dangers of allowing sophisticated weapons to reach Hezbollah guerrillas in neighboring Lebanon. With Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's grip on power weakening, Israeli officials fear he could soon lose control over his substantial arsenal of chemical and advanced weapons, which could slip into the hands of Hezbollah or other hostile groups. These concerns, combined with Hezbollah's own domestic problems, mean further military action could be likely. We will be in fact talking more about these developments in the past 1 week. This week on the show, I welcome Mr. Waiel Awwad, senior journalist. Welcome to the show, sir. But before I take your comments on the show, on this increasingly volatile situation with respect to Syria and Israel and how the situation is likely to pan out in the days to come, why don't we have a look at this comprehensive report?
Israel launched a rare airstrike inside Syria, targeting a convoy believed to contain anti-aircraft weapons bound for Hezbollah militants in Lebanon. Another report from Syria contradicted Western sources, saying Israeli warplanes attacked a military research center in Damascus province.
We believe what Israeli did, it's illegal because, it is using, the sky of other country, which is illegal according to international community law. So it is not be accepted anyhow. But sorry to say, Bashar doesn't care about that this time. His aim these days just to stop the revolution there, to kill his people, not to protect his land or his sky.
2 people were killed and 5 wounded in the attack on the site in Jamraya, which is described as a number of scientific research centers aimed at raising the level of resistance and self-defense. The attack adds a potentially flammable new element to tensions already heightened by Syria's civil war.
İsrail'in yaptığı iddia edilen bu askeri operasyon hakkında.
We don't have any official information regarding the attack that is alleged to be carried out by Israel. We have been out watching the developments from the media. However, this incident shows how complicated the situation in Syria has become and how it threatens international peace in the region.
Ne kadar karmaşık, ne kadar kötü ve uluslararası bölgesel barışta tehditler bir hale geldiğini herhalde bir kere daha gösteriyor.
Syria protested to the United Nations on Thursday over the Israeli airstrike on its territory and warned of a possible surprise response. A statement issued by the cabinet condemned Wednesday's attack and said it considered the raid a danger against the region's countries. The statement called for the Security Council and the United Nations to take immediate measures in response to the violation. Israel has maintained total silence over the attack, as it did in 2007 when it bombed a suspected Syrian nuclear site, an attack which passed without Syrian military retaliation.
All right, let's take things further, but Mr. Awwad, let's start from the basics over here. There's still so much ambiguity as to, what was the target here and what was this strike really all about. What are you hearing? What are your sources telling you? Please share with us.
Well, to be honest, it is the clear aggression by the Israelis on a sovereign nation. That is already understood. It's against the UN charters, and everybody has condemned such kind of adventure by Netanyahu government, which trying to export its own problem outside the country. To say this is a chemical installation area or a rocket or launching places, it is absolutely absurd because it's a highly populated area. If that bombing by the Israelis would have made a catastrophe in the region, and we'd have heard more story aftermath. So the main action was, and the main target was, a research center, a scientific research center, a defense research center by the Syrian government, where the rebels and the mercenaries inside Syria, within that territories, have failed to achieve. Now Israel came to support them by the air, by attacking the center. Because if you look at the Daraya area, near rural area of Damascus and very close to the center, there was a trend by all the rebels having the maps from their intelligence sources, foreign, who is active in Turkey border. They are giving them all the sources where to attack the Syrian arm installation, anti-missiles installations, and these are nothing to do with the war. So therefore, it was a military target which has been putting Israel and Jabhat al-Nusra, the Al-Qaeda, are partners in the crime against Syria.
All right. Interesting information there, but also, you know, if you look at the larger perspective, what do you think was Israel's agenda behind this attack? One thing is clear, that it has clearly inserted itself into the civil war that is already taking place within Syria. Now, what's the big game plan here?
Well, everybody knows that this fight in Syria, or is part of the Arab Spring, it's nothing indigenous. It is an externally imposed kind of a war on Syria, because if you see, there are more than 30 nationalities, including Indians, by the way, are part of the mercenaries of the extremist Islamists inside, supported by Turkey and United States and the West and some of the reactionary Arab forces, the Gulf, they call them the Saudi Arabia and Qatar. So Israel has been there always. Even the anti-tank missile being used by the rebels now, it has the Israelis mark. And also food stuff and medical stuff coming from Turkey, it's also have the Israeli mark. Therefore, the truce between Syria and Israel has been, since 1973 war, has been respected by the Syrian, by the way. But Israel now realized that the Syrian government have also supported Hamas, supported Hezbollah in Lebanon. It is a kind of retaliation by the Israelis against the military installation of the Syrian government, which can pose strategically danger to the Israelis.
But having said that, going back to 2007, we saw a similar strike by Israel on a nuclear establishment, a nuclear plant within Syria. And at that time too, there wasn't really any sort of retaliation from the Syrian side. So people are really, you know, sort of started to wonder, even though Syria has said it's ready for a surprise attack, it's said that. But do we expect that not to happen? And the same thing that we saw in 2007, the reaction?
I think the Syrians were prepared to do so, but the Russians have tried to control Syria in this, not to retaliate in attacking a center in Israel. You see, Syrian government and the intelligence information we have got that Israel were planning an attack on Syria by February. And now Israel is already preparing the ground for such, because they have failed on the ground. Their own tools in the ground have failed to achieve what they want. Therefore, Israel is trying to explore its own problem, you know. This is the policy where we know that this is the Israelis' time now, wanted to do something on this war. If they are going to do it, a misadventure is going to be very painful, because the Syrian government, yes, it has been violated many times by the Israelis. The Syrian government hold the right of retaliating, but they will choose the time. They will not be dragged into a war of not their choice and the timing. Therefore, I think the Syrian government is very well aware, because the moment you start attacking the south of Syria, where you're trying to put pressure on the sources, on the military of the Syrian government, based on the south, not to go for the offensive on the north, where the Turkish border is already been almost controlled by the rebels and the Jabhat al-Nusra. So all the smuggling of arms and mercenaries is coming from Turkey. So the Syrian government was trying to put an end that side. Therefore, I think it is an open game for everybody now. And Syria have already warned that this is going to be spreading around. So Israel played the dangerous card, and I think the misadventure will pay back and negatively on the Israeli themselves.
Right. But do you feel with this attack, there's a lot of pressure suddenly on, you know, President Assad, because we must remember that within Syria too, the situation is very volatile, and there's a lot much to deal with within the nation, rather than to, you know, focus resources and attention to other situations at this point in time. If you can just give us a sense of what, you know, is happening within Syria, you know, leaving alone this recent strike that we've seen.
See, in terms of the external danger, the Syrian government is very well prepared. And that is why most of the strategic installation and strategic weapons has not been utilized till now. And I can assure you, and assure your viewers also, that not more than 20 to 30% of the Syrian army has been utilized till date, which means that Syria is well prepared for it. Having said that, I wouldn't say that what's happening on the ground, it's very grim. Situation is quite bad. many people are getting killed. Many Syrians are being, the blood of Syrians spilled all over, whether it is from the government side, whether it's from the rebel side. But if we look at the rebels and the mercenaries, the way they are slaughtering people in the street, killing the civilian, accusing the government, at the end of the day, the Syria is paying the price. They are trying to keep Syria bleeding slowly till it becomes exhausted like the Iraq, and then they can take over. Those wolves kind of people wearing the suits and sitting in their borders waiting for that moment to attack Syria. I think Syria is well prepared, and the Syrian gaining the ground on a very slow pace. It is a long war, which is going to happen. But the only thing is we should also remember that the discovery of oil in the Mediterranean and the big power now sharing the big cakes of splitting this assets between themselves, I think the Syrian doesn't have much to say at the moment with the current war on the ground, because it's going to happen very soon that we will see when the summit happened between Obama and Putin, then we might see a kind of a compromise in the Syrian situation. But till then, Syrian will keep on bleeding and paying the price for that.
All right, now, just concluding comments, the reaction of the United States, there was a statement from Defense Secretary Panetta. She is increasingly concerned about the chaos in Syria, saying that the situation could allow Hezbollah to obtain sophisticated weaponry from the Damascus regime. Then also Israel's, continuous silence on, after this strike. In your concluding remarks, what would you say? Where are things headed now?
I think this is ridiculous to say that this is a strategical weapon going to Hezbollah. Hezbollah does not need non-conventional weapons to defeat Israel. They have already defeated Israel twice. They have enough resistance culture inside their blood to defend any kind. With a stone, you can hurt Israel. Therefore, I don't see any strategic weapon of non-conventional type can be used either by Israelis, either by the Syrian or by Hezbollah, because the moment you use those strategic weapons, we are all at danger. Our own existence will be affected. We are too close to each other. I don't see this is the reason. I think the reason is to destabilize Syria. The army of Syria, the doctrine should be removed. And because if you see the condition they are putting for a peaceful solution to the crisis, you realize that the picture which we are focusing now, we have to look behind that picture, which is the bigger picture of what's going on in Syria.
All right, looking at the bigger picture, that's always what it's all about. You said Syria is slowly bleeding out, but it still holds the right to retaliate. Let's see where things go as far as Syria and Israel are concerned. Let's hope for a more peaceful sort of a way ahead. Thank you so much, Dr. Awwad, for joining me on the show this week and sharing your views with us. We are heading in for a short break. After that, a look at some key pacts signed between India and Bangladesh this week. Stay tuned. The crisis that began in Egypt last week continued to get worse. After President Mohamed Morsi ordered troops to be deployed in Suez last Saturday, a state of emergency was declared in the three cities of Suez, Ismailia and Port Said. The opposition finally agreed for a dialogue with the government on Thursday and signed a document renouncing violence.
Egypt's feuding politicians met on Thursday, summoned by the country's most influential Islamic scholars who made them call an end to violence after a week of the deadliest protests since President Mohamed Morsi took office. The meeting, called by the head of the 1,000-year-old Al-Azhar University and Mosque, was attended both by top officials of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood as well as secularist foes who had previously rebuffed the Islamist president's calls for talks. The attendees signed a document renouncing violence at the meeting. They also agreed to set up a committee grouping rival parties together to pave the way for more dialogue. Nearly 60 people have been killed in violent protests which broke out last week to mark the second anniversary of the uprising that toppled President Hosni Mubarak. Earlier, President Morsi had declared a state of emergency in the cities of Port Said, Suez and Ismailia after days of deadly unrest. Curfew was also imposed in these cities. People took to the streets of Ismailia and Alexandria shortly after President Mohamed Morsi declared a state of emergency there. Morsi's opponents, who accuse his party of betraying the revolution that ousted longtime ruler Hosni Mubarak, called for more demonstrations. But with dialogue finally being held on Thursday, things seem to have settled down for now. But the violence has exposed a deep rift in the nation, with liberals and other opponents accusing Morsi of failing to deliver on economic promises and saying he has not lived up to pledges to represent all Egyptians.
The surprisingly rapid advance of France's military offensive in Mali has freed all the major towns that had been under Islamist control and driven al-Qaeda-linked militias back into the desert and mountainous regions in the north. In fact, France's intervention to halt extremist militias threatening to storm the entire country has been so successful that French President François Hollande announced a February 2nd visit to Mali's capital, Bamako, just 3 weeks after the anti-Islamist operation began.
These were the scenes from the northeastern Malian town of Kidal, which a secular rebel group said they had just recaptured from al-Qaeda-allied Islamist fighters. Kidal, the capital of a remote region that borders with Algeria, had been the last urban stronghold in North Mali, occupied by al-Qaeda-allied Islamist fighters. Earlier, the French and Malian army recaptured the towns of Gao and Timbuktu.
This is explosive powder. If this explodes, everyone would be sprayed over, all around in a big area. All this is very dangerous. It is meant to burn the system down.
Meanwhile, France said it favored a quick deployment of international monitors to Mali to ensure that human rights are not abused.
Je précise toutefois que le comité international.
I point out, though, that the International Committee of the Red Cross has not so far confirmed acts that have been reported on this subject by some non-governmental organizations. The French government is nevertheless in favor of rapidly deploying international observers to ensure that human rights are respected.
Veilleront au respect des droits de l'homme.
International donors meeting in Addis Ababa pledged just over $455 million for the Mali crisis, but it was not clear whether all of this would go directly to the African Intervention Force, which African leaders have estimated will cost almost $1 billion. Britain is considering sending over 200 non-combat troops to help the military operation against Islamist militants in Mali, with a decision expected within days.
The role of British troops, as I've set out in my response to the question, is clearly not a combat role and will also not extend, as we envisage it at the moment, to a force protection role.
French and Malian troops over the past 2 weeks have driven Islamist insurgents out of some areas of North Mali they occupied last year. The Islamists imposed severe Sharia in areas they had seized. The Malian troops have also been accused by international human rights groups of carrying out revenge killings of suspected Islamist rebels and sympathizers.
India and Bangladesh signed 2 landmark agreements, an extradition treaty to facilitate transfer of criminals and terrorists, and an agreement to liberalize the visa regime between the two countries on January 28th. With this, New Delhi now expects it will be able to take back ULFA's General Secretary Anup Chetia to stand trial in India. Meanwhile, once the agreement to liberalize the visa regime between the two countries is put in force, tourists from the neighboring countries will get visas for up to 1 year. Have a look at this report.
India and Bangladesh signed a liberalized visa agreement and a landmark extradition pact during Home Minister Sushil Kumar Shinde's visit to Dhaka. The new visa agreement will do away with certain checks on the visits of business representatives, senior citizens above the age of 65 years and children below 12 years.
Dhaka mein extradition treaty or
in Dhaka, both the extradition treaty and the travel document treaty have been endorsed. A lot of good things have developed since then. It was an important step that was taken by both the countries to discuss the extradition treaty for the criminals. Anup Chetia is in jail right now, and we have forwarded our request to Bangladesh in that regard.
Anup Chetia के बारे में वो जेल में है, उसके भी बारे में हमने हमारा कहना वहाँ रख दिया है.
The extradition treaty does not, however, mean that Dhaka would be able to hand over Anup Chetia, secretary of the banned United Liberation Front of Assam, immediately. The two deals, signed in Dhaka on Monday, is the first significant forward movement in bilateral relations after Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's visit to Bangladesh in September 2011.
All right, with that, time for another short breather. After that, updates from showbiz. Great theatrical, The Phantom of the Opera completes 25 years. Don't go anywhere. You're watching World Panorama. Time now to take a quick look at some of the other international news in a quick wrap. Here's Globe Watch.
Massachusetts Senator John Kerry bid farewell to the U.S. Senate on Wednesday as he stepped down from his elected position to join President Barack Obama's cabinet as the next Secretary of State. Kerry, a 5-term senator, delivered a speech nearly an hour long in which he cited the decline of comity, the influence of money, and the disregard for facts as challenges to the Senate as an institution. A U.S. convoy carrying Patriot launcher systems and other units of surface-to-air missiles left Iskenderun port on Thursday. The convoy is headed to a military base in southeastern province of Gaziantep, where the systems will be deployed to bolster Turkey's air defenses against any possible missile attack from Syria. The frontier has become a flashpoint in the 22-month insurgency against President Bashar al-Assad, with Syrian government shells frequently landing inside Turkish territory, drawing a response in kind from Ankara's military. A roadside bomb killed one Afghan police officer and wounded 8 others in the southern province of Helmand on Thursday. The blast also caused a passenger Corolla car to crash into the explosion site right after the bomb went off, killing 1 passenger and wounding 2 others, according to local police. 3 advanced Chinese warships left port on 29 January for naval drills and war games in the Western Pacific and South China Sea as tensions with neighbors over disputed islands remain high. The official Yinhua news agency described the maneuvers as routine, but they come as China is engaged in an increasingly bitter, high-stakes dispute over maritime territory with Japan and with several Southeast Asian nations.
And if you've missed this week's big sports news, here's your chance to catch it all in our next report.
Mario Balotelli, whose wacky antics have filled British newspapers almost daily in the last 2.5 years, is set to return to Italy with AC Milan after a deal was agreed with Manchester City on Tuesday. The Italian striker first broke through at rivals Inter Milan and is returning home for a fee media reports have put at €20 million after a largely frustrating spell with the English champions. Tiger Woods withstood a late bogey, double bogey, par, bogey wobble in strengthening wins to clinch his 75th PGA Tour title by 4 shots at the fog-delayed Farmers Insurance Open. 6 strokes in front overnight at 17 under with 11 holes to play in the final round. Woods kept his closest challengers at bay as he signed off with a level par 72 on a cold, sun-splashed afternoon at Torrey Pines. His 75th career victory on the US circuit put him 7 behind the record 82 piled up by Sam Snead, the only player ahead of him in the all-time standings. Novak Djokovic became the first man to win 3 successive Australian Open titles in the professional era when he beat 3rd seed Andy Murray 6-7, 7-6, 6-3, 6-2 in a battle of attrition on Sunday. The Serb, who has now won 4 of his 6 Grand Slam titles at Melbourne, managed to win the important points as the Briton suffered from blisters on his right foot and problems at the top of his left hamstring.
Time now for all the very latest news from the world of movies and lifestyle. Here's our entertainment wrap.
In his latest flick, Sylvester Stallone pays homage to classic action films in the new movie Bullet to the Head. Stallone stars as a New Orleans hitman who teams up with a Washington, D.C. cop played by Sung Kang to hunt down the person responsible for killing their respective partners. At the red carpet premiere in New York on Tuesday, Stallone explained how the film is different from modern-day action films. Bullet to the Head was released in US theaters on the 1st February. Dutch Queen Beatrix announced she was abdicating in favor of her son Prince Willem-Alexander, who will become the king on 30th April. Queen Beatrix turned 75 on Thursday. Willem-Alexander, who's 45, is married to Princess Maxima Zorreguieta and has 3 young children. Decades of grooming for the throne involved shaking off his image as a beer-drinking fraternity boy whose blunt comments upset the press and politicians. Beatrix said in a television broadcast to the nation that she was stepping down because she felt her son was ready to take her place on the throne. The Phantom of the Opera remains one of the most successful and longest-running musicals in the world and celebrates its 25th anniversary this year with a special show at the Majestic Theatre in New York. Created by Andrew Lloyd Webber, the play boasts more than 9,000 performances in London alone and had 3 sold-out performances at the Royal Albert Hall on its 25th year. It's also the longest run in Broadway history, with more than 100 million people watching the show since it opened in 1986.
That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. I'll be back next week, same time, with more world news. Till then, you can join us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates from us. As I sign off, take a look at these extremely colorful visuals from Venice. It's carnival time. Hundreds of revelers crowded the water city's narrow alleys, squares and bridges as the 17-day gala kicks off. Goodbye and Godspeed.